Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for allowing me to come and speak to your group here about food safety. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and it's a privilege to speak about the cell-cultured seafood, on behalf of BlueNalu, but also on behalf of food safety. They're two things that I'm very passionate about. So my talk today is about culturing food safety for the future of seafood. And it has seafood in the title because obviously I work for a seafood company and we're working on cell cultured seafood, but it's really principles or ideas that you could apply to any food company that you're working at, particularly startups that are in our space. Oop, sorry. There we go. Okay. So this is an outline for my talk. So I really want to talk about why food safety is important in general and particularly for our industry. I want to talk to you about what food safety, what culture has to do with it, what company culture has to do with food safety, and then talk about who's actually responsible for establishing that culture and what can we do working in startup companies like the one that I work in, and I'm sure the ones that many of you work in. How can we start conversations and start building food safety culture now? And then also talk about when's a good time to start. I think, a question that a lot of people might have in their mind is, where pre-commercialization is food safety something that we should be thinking about now? And my answer is absolutely. And then at the end, hopefully if I don't run over, we'll have some time for questions and answers. Oh, Ahmed already did a great job introducing me, and I really appreciate that. But I'm going to put this slide up there anyway, because I want to point out at the bottom my contact information. I do consider myself a food safety advocate and have some expertise in food safety. And I believe in the cell cultured industry that food safety is not something that we should compete on. We should all be working together. At BlueNalu, we have a phrase where we use the proverb, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I want to be part of that rising tide for cell cultured food safety. So please feel free if you have questions after the presentation or you want to reach out to me, you can contact me at my email address there, and you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'm really interested to hear about what you're doing in your organizations to promote food safety. So a little bit about BlueNalu. We are a cell-cultured seafood startup company, and we're founded in 2018, so we're still relatively young. Located in San Diego, beautiful San Diego. It happens to be raining today, but generally it's very sunny and very pleasant here. We have about 45 employees and we're always growing. We're working on several different finfish species, and right now our initial product that we're targeting is bluefin tuna. And I do want to highlight that BlueNalu is a great place to work. I'm not in HR, but I do love the company and I love what I do here. And we're always looking for good people. So I have a link here. If you want to contact me, I can send you my presentation. I have links in here to additional reading or additional information that you could use to promote food safety within your company. Right there, though, is a link to the BlueNalu careers website. So if you're interested in coming to work for a company like us, you can find the link there. And then a little bit about our mission. So BlueNalu our mission is to be the global leader in cell cultured seafood. And we want to provide consumers with something that's not only great tasting, but healthy and safe. And we want to make sure that it's trusted, so that we can succeed in our vision to support sustainability and the diversity of the ocean. So I think working at BlueNalu, it's a unique opportunity to bring the ocean into the sustainability story. So the global demand for seafood is at an all-time high, and people are, increasingly choosing to eat all the different types and varieties of seafood that's available. But unfortunately, the global demand can't keep up. The global supply can't keep up with the demand. So there's populations of marine species that have literally halved in the past 40 or so years. And it's due to a variety of reasons. It's overfishing, but it's also things that are related to climate change, including the rising ocean temperatures, acidification, and several other factors. So working at BlueNalu is really exciting because each and every one of us can be part of making this positive change happen. So when I start talking about food safety, I think one thing I'd like to talk about is why. Why is food safety important? So I always want to start with why. And I got my inspiration from a book that some of you may be familiar with. It's written by Simon Sinek. It's a favorite of mine. And it's also the subject of one of the most watched TED Talks. It's called How Great Leaders Inspire Action. And so the book itself, it really has nothing to do with food safety, but it does provide insight into leadership and human motivation. So my take on this, as I apply, start with why to food safety, I believe that employees and others, they will not and they cannot buy into food safety until they understand why it's so important. So understanding that there's a bigger cause behind the actions that we take to promote food safety, it can inspire and motivate people and really help ensure it. So I think it's very, very important that we emphasize why food safety is important. So given that, that's the first topic in my presentation today, is to explain why food safety is important. And I think some of the reasons are very obvious and you'll be familiar with them, but I don't think it can hurt to be reminded. So the first one is, why is food safety important for cell-cultured seafood? And I put in meat and poultry in parentheses there because, again, I'm speaking from my perspective at a seafood company, but it really could apply to any cell-cultured product or any food product for that matter. So food safety, first and foremost, it's important because it's the law. And selling food that can cause illness or injury can result in criminal fines and prosecution for companies and individuals. So I know many people who are in the cell culture industry are coming from academia, or they may be coming from pharmaceutical or biotech companies. So I thought I would share some information from the food industry that, to understand the consequences of not following the regulations. So there's a couple of case studies there. And again, if you reach out to me, I can share these slides with you and you can follow the links to learn more. But the one about Chipotle, I think it was on the news a lot and a lot of people heard about it, but they actually had to pay $25 million in fines because they were failing to enforce food safety protocols for their employees, and thousands of people became sick with norovirus. And then the second one there's actually a picture, that's one of the Parnell brothers, and he was the owner and operator of the Peanut Corporation of America. And they were guilty of knowingly releasing and selling peanut products that were contaminated with salmonella. And the gentleman in the picture, I believe, received a 28-year prison sentence for his involvement in that activity. So there's some very serious civil and criminal penalties that are associated with lack of food safety. Another important reason is that if you sell unsafe food or you have food safety problems with your products, it can result in huge financial losses. So there's an estimated annual cost of foodborne illness, and this is a conservative estimate. The paper that's linked there ranges between 55.5 billion and 176 billion. So it's very expensive. And if a company recalls a single product, it can result in about 10 million in direct costs alone. So, and then in addition, recalls can affect our stock price or our valuation, and ultimately the company could go bankrupt. So I put a couple of case studies here. This one's very recent. It's a dairy in Oregon that just recently shut down over the summer over safety concerns. So they completely just had to close shop. And the second one is another company that had to close shop, a soy nut butter company, where they had an E. coli outbreak, and the cost of that just overwhelmed the company and they could no longer stay in business. So it's important to, to our companies as well. Another reason why is because the success of our industry and a food category, I believe, depends on it. So, what we're doing is brand new. Cell culture application to food is brand new, and people are, a little wary. It's a new technology. They're not sure about it. They don't know if it's going to be safe. And I think that this is my personal opinion, is that a cell cultured food safety incident could cast a shadow over similar products and result in loss for not just that individual company, but for the entire industry. And the reason why is because political pressure, when it's applied at the right moment, can have enormous negative outcomes. So that, I was going to talk about, GMOs. GMOs are banned in countries all around the world, despite having a good safety profile in terms of, consumption. People can disagree with that if they want. This case study that I put there, though, is about tryptophan. So tryptophan is a nutritional supplement sold in the country for many years. And I believe it was in the early 90s, 1989, 1990, there was a safety incident where the product was contaminated and thousands of people became ill, and actually 39 people died. That was due to a chemical contamination from the production process. And this problem was associated with a single company and a relatively small number of batches. However, due to the political climate at the time surrounding nutritional supplements and particularly tryptophan, some advocates or some detractors from tryptophan were able to convince the government to ban tryptophan, and not just from that supplier, but from every supplier. So for the next 15 years, until other people were able to act and overturn that, tryptophan was actually illegal in the United States from 1995 until about 2005, and it was clearly associated with a single company, and it was clearly associated with a manufacturing issue. Yet it affected the entire tryptophan industry. And then the last, and I think the most important reason why food safety is important, it's because of people. People who consume unsafe food can get injured, they can become seriously ill, they could suffer long-term health consequences and potentially die. And the thing that I think about is that person could be somebody that I love, right? And the standard that I use for myself is the product safe enough to serve to those people who are closest to me, those who are nearest and dearest to me? Would I serve this to my parent, to my partner, to my sister or brother, to my children, to anyone in my family or my friends? And to me, that's the most important why. So these products we make, and when we put them out on the market, each and every one of us working in the industry have to be convinced that it's absolutely safe. And we have to be able to demonstrate that to the degree that we would be willing to serve it on a regular basis to the people that we care about. And so for me, when I talk about starting with why, this is the most important motivation, is because food safety is really about protecting people. And those people could be potentially as close as our own family. So now I want to make the link between food safety and company culture. So what do these two things have to do with each other? So food safety and quality management. So many of the companies out there, they're pre-production. They're not starting production yet, so they may not have this food safety and quality management system. But when you get to that point, you'll have policies and procedures and training, and you could have a very excellent system that does really well when you get audited. But our experience tells us that procedures alone are not enough. So even if you have like the best system, it meets all the checks in an audit, it's only as good as the people who implement it. So employee behavior plays a really important role in food safety. And therefore, as leaders in the food safety and in the cell cultured industry, we really have to understand this behavioral piece, because we can understand regulations, we can understand standards, we can write excellent procedures, but if no one follows them, it doesn't get us anywhere. So company culture actually plays a big role in employee behavior. It defines the right way to act and behave within a company or organization, and it really influences what people do. So in many cases, there are kind of these underlying norms and behaviors, and sometimes it's unspoken. So it's kind of what we do around here. And food safety culture, so if you combine the two concepts of food safety and culture, food safety culture are those shared values and beliefs and the norms that we set that affect the way people think and the way that they behave towards food safety. And it's, another way of putting it is, it's what's happening when no one is looking. So, based on what your employees see, or your colleagues or coworkers see, what do they believe is acceptable behavior? So food safety culture, it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's something that we have to work on. It takes time to grow. We have to take care of it and nurture it to make it mature. And so that's why I think it's important to talk about it when companies are in a very early stage, because, just like the cell cultures that we're growing, we can start to seed food safety culture within our companies right now. So if we're going to start, who's responsible? The answer, like many things within an organization, is it starts at the top. So I put a picture here of a champagne tower. I don't know if you've ever been to a wedding where they had one of these, or maybe did it on a cruise. But it's a really great illustration. They pour champagne, which is lovely and tastes good, and it's for celebration, into the top glass, and then it pours over into the other glasses and gets spread from the top all the way to the bottom. And I think it's a great illustration of what leadership can do. So great things can flow from the leaders, because people are looking at them, they're looking to see how they behave, how they act, how they make decisions. And so leaders can be that top glass on the champagne tower and have good things flow for them. So organizational leadership then, in my opinion, it has to set the tone and the direction for a food safety culture. So it's how the leaders talk, how they make decisions, how they allocate resources, so hiring somebody to work on food safety or not, and how they behave relative to food safety all affects the culture. So, they're watching the way that the CEO talks about food safety. They're watching the way that, the person that's in charge of your R&D department considers food safety in the development process. And it's, creating a mindset whether or not food safety is important to your company or not. And so to be effective, food safety culture has to be a conscious effort. It has to be defined and managed and monitored. So leaders are actually the ones they're going to have the most effect, and they're going to establish the shared beliefs and values around food safety. So what we communicate and reinforce through different things is, like I said, is what ultimately shapes how employees think and how they behave and what they understand about food safety. And again, I have a link here to the Global Food Safety Initiative. They have guidelines to help companies learn how to establish and maintain a healthy food safety culture. And so right there are the 5 elements. So it's setting the vision and mission, concentrating on people, making sure you're consistent, being adaptable and changing as necessary when you learn new things, and always making sure that you have an awareness of the hazards and risks that your product presents. So now I'd like to talk about some practical application. We know food safety is important. We know culture plays a role. We know leaders are the ones that set the culture, but what are some practical steps that you can take today as a startup company to start thinking about food safety and start building that correct culture within your company? So one thing is to create a vision and strategy for your food safety program. So in my opinion, it's never too early to start thinking about it. So what are your expectations and priorities? Making food safety part of your business strategy. You can dedicate resources to food safety to emphasize its importance. Maybe you're small and you are not ready to hire a food safety manager or quality director like me, but someone within your organization could wear that hat and take responsibility and be that voice within your company until you get to that point. And then I think it's really important to clearly and consistently communicate what your commitment is to food safety and to start talking about it from the beginning. So I have some practical examples from what we've done at BlueNalu. So one is, when we talk about food safety, we tell our employees that the food safety regulations are the minimum standard. Sometimes people look at the regulations and think, oh, wow, they're, way up here. We want to think about them, a little bit lower in the stratosphere. We want to think of them as our minimum standard. And so, like Ahmed mentioned in the beginning, how important food safety, and it's communicating to our future customers as well that BlueNalu puts food safety first. We've already hired resources that are dedicated to food safety, so I'm one of them. I work in quality and regulatory, and then I have a quality manager. Her name is Chio Saturn. She's wonderful, very knowledgeable in food safety, and is helping me put our programs together. And then we have another individual who's very experienced in quality. His name is Giovanni. So we have already hired resources that are dedicated to food safety, and they're embedded and working with our development process. And we communicate to employees that quality and food safety is everyone's responsibility. So our CEO, his name is Luke Cooperhouse. I absolutely love working for him. He has spent some time working as a quality professional like me, so he's a great advocate internally and externally for food safety. So it's wonderful to work under a CEO who is actively promoting food safety in the company, even when we're at such an early stage. So some more things that you can do to build food safety culture. One is to make sure that employees know about food safety, that they have the knowledge that they need. So you can train key employees on food safety principles and risk assessment. So like I said, you may not be ready to hire someone, but you could certainly, assign someone to get the right training that they need to understand food safety. And then using that knowledge, you can design food safety into the process from the beginning. What are the things of concern in your media formulation? How can you best design your facility and your process? How can you select the best equipment to ensure food safety? So some examples from BlueNalu, one is that we're already doing food safety training for employees. It's not all the time and every day, but once a month, a couple of times a quarter, we are having conversations about food safety. And I think it's helping the folks in R&D to really understand what the biological, chemical, and physical risks are to this process. And then we've implemented a process of a sanitary review of equipment. So I mentioned our wonderful quality manager, Chio, joined the company, and she's been instrumental when R&D selects new pieces of equipment to use in the process to review them and to provide feedback. Because many times the piece of equipment that you choose to use in R&D isn't really appropriate for production because of the materials of construction, or perhaps the design prevents a material hazard, foreign material hazard, or it's difficult to clean. There's a lot of things that can be different in a piece of R&D equipment versus a production equipment. So understanding the risks and evaluating what we're trying to do against the food safety requirements really helps to inform the process and make it better. Another thing that you can do is to build that internal awareness of potential hazards and risks. So it starts with, a key person getting the training, but then you can use that to draft your food safety plan. And you can use those results to inform, puts the risk in perspective, and it informs the development process. So I could give an example. When I first joined the company, I was in a conversation where we were looking at packaging equipment, but the packaging equipment we were evaluating was similar to a drug isolator, like a fill finish, aseptic fill finish. But in my opinion, at that point, when it's a food product, maybe that's not required. So it really puts the risk in perspective. And sometimes we're underestimating the risk, and sometimes we're overestimating it. So really understanding food safety and how to manage those risks can really help your design, your process design. Okay, so this is probably one thing that I really want to emphasize. So a lot of companies, they're investing in LCA for the sustainability piece. They're doing TEA analysis to understand how they can scale up and do it profitably. But I think there's some new acronyms that the cell cultured industry has to focus on. And those are FSP, which is a food safety plan, and HACCP, which is hazard analysis and critical control point. So these are two different ways of analyzing what you intend to do and determining the risks and taking actions to mitigate them in advance. And I don't think it's too early to do this. If you have a basic idea of how your process would flow, you can start doing your food safety plan. It won't be final. There'll be many revisions, but it will help inform your process, and it will help you have a better process, a safer process when you're ready for production. So I think it is really valuable to inform the team of potential hazards and give them a more comprehensive view of what the food safety requirements are, so that you understand what you need and what you're getting into from the beginning. So when you're ready to start commercial production, starting to write the food safety plan at that point is a little late, because there's controls that you need to have in place. And so HACCP is another way to assess the risks and hazards with your process. It's a preventive management system, and it's again used to identify and assess risks and hazards associated with specific foods. And this, what we're doing is new. So there's, opportunities for biochemical, maybe not so much physical, but biological and chemical hazards that don't exist or not possible with conventional foods. So it's really important to look at your process, look what you're attempting to do through this lens to make sure that you can consistently produce safe food. And the HACCP process, this is really basic. I'm trying to rush through and finish, but it's a very basic process that you can learn about. I really highly recommend that you get trained before conducting your analysis and talk to people who have done it for reasonably similar processes. So there may be fermentation processes that you can learn from, or other cultured foods, or aseptic foods that they're not identical, but they may have some of the similar control points. So that might be some useful input. And just remember that FSP, the food safety plan, and the HACCP plan, they're very similar, but they're not the same. A food safety plan has a wider scope, and it considers hazards that are potentially out of the process, like, for example, food fraud, which you wouldn't talk about in a HACCP plan. And HACCP is mostly focused on the critical control points and the validation of those controls in your process to make sure that it's safe. Okay, so the last question is, when is a good time to start? So I think it's never too early to start talking about food safety. So yesterday was a good day. Today is a good day too. So like I was saying, it's not too early to talk about food safety, but it can certainly be too late. So really, I really want to encourage people listening and to go back to your companies and to start those conversations about food safety. What are the things that we have to learn? What do we have to be aware of? What are the things that we potentially will have to control when we move towards commercialization? And so a 10,000 liter culture, these are the size cultures that we're anticipating having, it can start, or does start, with a single cell. And your food safety culture is the same. You can start small with just, creating that vision, but have a bigger plan and make sure that food safety is part of your strategy. So with that, hopefully we have a few minutes for questions. And if we don't get to your questions, I really welcome you to reach out to me by email or on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to talk to you about food safety anytime.